Ulysses S. Grant grew up far from the battlefield that would one day define his life. As a child in Ohio, he was gentle, quiet, and surprisingly shy. He preferred spending his time with horses rather than people, and he developed an extraordinary talent for handling them. While many boys his age imagined themselves as brave soldiers or heroes in glorious battles, Grant dreamed of a peaceful life. He openly admitted that he couldn't stand the sight of blood, and nothing about him suggested he would ever become a warrior. But life has a way of choosing its own path for people. As Grant grew older, the United States headed toward one of the darkest and bloodiest conflicts in its history, the Civil War. The quiet boy who avoided violence was suddenly placed on a road that would demand courage, strength, and leadership beyond anything he had ever imagined. Destiny had chosen him, even if he never wanted it. And although he longed for peace, he would one day become the man responsible for ending one of the most violent chapters in American history. His story shows how even the most unlikely person can be called to greatness when the world needs it most. As Ulysses S. Grant grew into adulthood, life presented him with relentless challenges. Despite his intelligence and determination, his early attempts at farming and business ended in failure. He invested time, energy, and hope into ventures that never succeeded, leaving him frustrated and disheartened. Poverty became a constant companion, and he often struggled to provide even the most basic needs for his family. At one point, he was forced to sell firewood just to make ends meet, a humbling experience for a man with so much potential. Friends and neighbors quietly doubted him, whispering that he would never amount to anything. They saw only the surface: failures, financial struggles, and setbacks. Yet beneath these hardships burned a quiet, unyielding strength. Grant possessed a calm and stubborn determination that others failed to recognize. While his external circumstances seemed bleak, internally he was building the resilience that would later define him. Every failure taught him patience, strategy, and perseverance. Even in moments of despair, he refused to give up entirely. This inner fire, invisible to those around him, was preparing him for a destiny far greater than anyone could have imagined. It would be this relentless determination that transformed a man marked by early failures into one of America's greatest heroes, Ulysses S. Grant's life begins to change. For years he struggled with failure and disappointment, but when the American Civil War broke out, everything shifted. The country was falling apart, and the Union desperately needed strong, reliable leaders. Many officers were proud, political, or afraid to take risks, but Grant was different. He wasn't loud, he didn't show off, and he didn't seek fame. He simply stepped forward because he felt it was his duty. This scene reveals that Grant didn't join the war for glory, he joined because the nation needed someone steady and determined. His quiet personality became his greatest strength. While others hesitated, Grant acted. While others worried about losing, he focused only on doing what had to be done. The war demanded discipline, patience, and courage, and Grant had all three even though he never saw himself as a hero. This is the moment where destiny connects with character. A humble man, shaped by hardship, becomes exactly the leader the country needs. It marks the beginning of his rise and shows how an ordinary man can become extraordinary when the right moment arrives. In this part of the story, Ulysses S. Grant begins to rise as a military leader, surprising everyone who once thought he would never succeed at anything. When the war starts, many generals hesitate or overthink their decisions, but Grant stands out because he moves with calm confidence. He doesn't try to impress anyone, he simply focuses on winning. His determination becomes his biggest strength, and soldiers begin to trust him because he never gives up, no matter how difficult the situation becomes. Grant's reputation grows after the Battle of Fort Donelson. When the enemy asked him for conditions of surrender, he replied with a simple message that shook the entire country: no terms except unconditional surrender. These words showed his fearless character and became a symbol of his leadership style. People realized that Grant was not a man who backed down or accepted halfway solutions. He fought until victory was certain. As he continues to win difficult battles, people who once doubted him begin to see him as a powerful and dependable commander. His success does not come from flashy strategies but from steady pressure, patience, and unbreakable willpower. This scene marks the transformation of a once failed man into a national hero. In this scene, Ulysses S. Grant's growing success finally reaches the attention of President Abraham Lincoln. By this time, many Union generals had failed to win important battles, and the war was dragging on with no clear end in sight. Lincoln was under enormous pressure to find a leader who could actually defeat the Confederate forces. When he looked at Grant's record, he noticed something different. Grant didn't hesitate, didn't complain, and didn't make excuses. He simply fought, and he won. Lincoln admired this straightforward determination. While other generals were cautious or afraid to take risks, Grant kept pushing forward. This made Lincoln believe that Grant was exactly the kind of leader the Union needed. His victories showed that he was not just lucky, he was committed, focused, and willing to do whatever was necessary to save the nation. Because of this confidence, Lincoln promoted Grant to command the entire Union Army. It was a defining moment. A quiet man who once struggled in life was now responsible for leading the country's most important military force. This scene highlights how Grant earned trust through action, not words, and how his steady strength caught the eye of the most important leader in the nation. Scene 6 captures the final and most intense phase of Ulysses S. Grant's journey as a military leader. By this time, the Civil War had dragged on for years. Cities were destroyed, families were torn apart, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers had already lost their lives. The nation was exhausted, and people were desperate for an end. Grant understood that the longer the war continued, the more suffering it would bring. That is why he pushed forward with relentless determination, refusing to let fear or fatigue slow him down. Grant led the Union Army through some of the toughest battles of the entire war. He faced strong resistance, harsh weather, and enormous losses, yet he never stopped advancing. His strategy was simple but powerful: keep pressing the enemy until they have no strength left to continue. Every step he took was aimed at ending the conflict and bringing peace back to the nation. His persistence finally forced Confederate General Robert E. Lee into a corner. By April 1865, Lee had no choice but to surrender. When this moment came, it wasn't just a military victory, it was the beginning of healing for a divided country. Grant's steady leadership helped end one of the darkest periods in American history. Scene 7 shows the true character of Ulysses S. Grant at the very moment when he could have celebrated his greatest victory. After years of brutal fighting, endless sacrifice, and unimaginable loss, the Civil War had finally come to an end. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered, and Grant stood as the man who brought the Union its long-awaited victory. Most commanders in history would have celebrated loudly, demanded revenge, or humiliated their enemy. But Grant was different. His goal was never glory, it was peace. When the surrender was signed, Grant remained calm and humble. He ordered his soldiers not to cheer or insult the defeated side. He understood that both armies were made up of Americans, and now that the war was over, they needed to come together again as one nation. Grant even allowed Confederate soldiers to keep their horses so they could return home and rebuild their lives. This act of kindness showed that he was thinking about the future, not the past. In this scene, Grant proves that true leadership is not just about winning battles, it is about healing wounds. His humility and compassion helped the country begin the long process of recovering from the war and moving forward in unity.